if Iran goes ahead and takes that step of actually closing off or choking the Strait of Hormuz, what does it really mean for India? Let's look at the India picture here. Now, the reason that we've been talking about this having an impact on India is first because about 45% of India's oil supply actually comes via the Strait of Hormuz. All the supplies from the Middle East, it passes through this particular strait. Oil prices could soar above $100 to $120 per barrel if this route is shut. That obviously affects every single country in the world. India too won't be immune to that kind of a price surge. Soaring fuel prices may directly lead to inflation in India as well. So what the government will do on that front remains a big question mark, because there are some things that we can control. But like if global oil prices go up, that's something that will hit every country. The closed Strait of Hormuz may lead India to actually resort to using longer, costlier routes. Essentially, then you have to shell out more. The other big takeaway of how all of this impacts India is the Chabahar port project, one that was deemed as a game changer. It's an India-Iran project. It could be affected, essentially delayed. But let me just put this in context for you. How badly is India going to be affected if Iran does this? We've broken down for you what really India's oil sources are as of 2025. And you can see there the maximum amount of oil comes in from Russia, 38%. Iraq at 16%, from Saudi Arabia 15%, from UAE 10%. But you see those numbers, and essentially the number one contributor is Russia. So there you're not going to face any problem. But then Iraq, Saudi Arabia, UAE, it's from these countries essentially that we could face a problem. And I'd like to bring in Siddharth Zarabi, editor of Business Today TV, to join us on this broadcast. Siddharth, what do you think? If Iran takes that step of closing off the Strait of Hormuz, is there a worry for India? And what have government sources told you about what they're planning to do then?
Well, any change, volatility or spike in crude oil prices is never good for India. That's what history has taught us. If Iran were to be suicidal and choke off the Hormuz Strait, estimates suggest that crude oil prices could jump immediately between 30 to 50%. And there are estimates that I have seen of $110, $120 to the barrel. But is that going to happen? Perhaps not. There are two clear reasons for that. More than India, China is the biggest player when it comes to Hormuz Strait. 50% of China's crude oil gets transported from there. It's a resource-hungry nation. It doesn't have crude oil sources of the kind that America has. Remember, America's dependence on Gulf oil, as it is broadly called, is perhaps 5 to 7% at best. Therefore, China and its very close relationship with Iran will perhaps be the biggest guiding hand. So the Chinese hand is what will really guide a final decision by the Supreme Council of Iran on what would be clearly very, very suicidal economically also for Iran. Remember, Iran is a significant crude oil exporter. Much of its foreign exchange earnings come on this account. Therefore, to expect that Iran would want to commit economic harakiri, we'll have to wait and watch whether it chooses to retaliate by cutting off its nose or whether it chooses some other path.
And what do you think, Siddharth, of how the government here in India is also choosing to respond? Right now, they're saying that there's no reason to worry because we largely also get our oil supplies from Russia. Do you think that's the case, that besides global oil prices affecting us in India, there are other reasons to be concerned?
Well, you know, the fact is that in the last 11 years and 3 administrations of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I would argue that this is the longest ever in the past 20-25 years that pump prices of petrol and diesel have remained frozen pretty much since mid-2022. There have been tax changes, but consumers have been protected through spikes that have happened previously as well as downfall. So very clearly what the government seems to be suggesting, and we have heard Oil Minister Hardeep Puri also speak on this, and given electoral considerations, state elections or all of that, even if there is a spike, the consumer is going to remain protected. as far as petrol and diesel are concerned. There could be some hit that will have to be taken on LPG again. But broadly speaking, I personally believe that as far as a direct consumer hit is concerned, unless there is some huge massive fallout, consumers in India should remain protected for the future.
Well, we certainly hope so. I'm sure for all of our viewers watching this broadcast, they're heaving a sigh of relief hearing what you have to say, Siddharth. Thank you very much for joining us here on Super 6. Thanks, Siddharth.